trap was set on a Tuesday in March, 3 weeks before my 62nd birthday. I remember because I was in the kitchen making my second cup of coffee when my daughter called. Not texted. Called. She almost never calls anymore. It's always a string of emojis or a voice memo sent at odd hours. So when her name lit up my phone at 8:15 in the morning, I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite dread. More like the feeling you get right before weather turns. "Mom," she said, "we need to talk about some things. Important things. Can we come over Saturday?" We. She always said we now. Not she and her husband. Just we, like the two of them had merged into a single organism somewhere around year 3 of their marriage, and neither one of them had noticed. "Of course," I said. "I'll make lunch." I should have paid attention to that shift in my chest. My husband Gerald passed 4 years ago, April, pancreatic cancer, 6 weeks from diagnosis to the morning I sat beside his hospital bed holding his hand while the machines went quiet one by one. We had 34 years together, Gerald and I. He built his landscaping business from a single truck and a phone number on a roadside sign, and by the time he retired, he had 14 crews working 3 counties. He was meticulous about everything, his tools, his contracts, his finances. He left me comfortable. More than comfortable. The house was paid off. There were accounts. There was a financial advisor named Mr. Hensley I'd been meeting with twice a year since Gerald died because Gerald had made me promise I would. My daughter Simone knew all of this in the general way. Adult children know things about their parents' finances. Not the specifics, but the shape of it. She knew the house was mine outright. She knew I wasn't struggling. She knew Gerald had been careful. What she didn't know was that I had been careful too. Saturday came. I made a chicken casserole because it was Simone's favorite growing up. I set the table with the good placemats, the ones Gerald's mother had given us as a wedding gift. I was cutting bread when I heard the front door. I'd left it unlocked, and my daughter came in with her husband right behind her. His name is Derek, not the Derek from the name file. This is a different man entirely. One I'd watched my daughter choose at 28 with the kind of certainty that leaves no room for a mother's quiet hesitations. He was handsome in a way that required maintenance. Good suits, good haircut, a firm handshake he deployed like punctuation at the end of every sentence he wanted to win. "Something smells amazing," Simone said, hugging me. She looked tired. I noticed at first. There were shadows under her eyes that her makeup didn't quite reach, and she held her shoulders the way she used to as a teenager when something was wrong, and she hadn't decided yet whether to tell me. We sat down. We ate. The conversation was careful, the kind of careful that makes the air feel thick. Derek talked about his company, a commercial real estate firm, some deal that was almost closed, the usual. Simone pushed food around her plate. I waited. It was over the coffee that it happened. Derek reached into the bag he'd set beside his chair and pulled out a folder. He placed it on the table between us like he was presenting evidence. Which I would later understand he was. "We've been thinking," he said, "about your situation." My situation. I looked at my daughter. She was looking at the folder. "Mom, you're alone here," she said. "The house is a lot, the yard, the maintenance. And, I mean, what happens if something happens to you? You're not getting any younger." I was 61 years old at the time, in good health, walking 2 miles every morning and sharp as I'd ever been in my life. But I let her continue. "We thought," Derek said, and he opened the folder and slid a document toward me, "that it might make sense for you to add Simone to your accounts. Power of attorney, financial and medical, just so someone can manage things if you can't." I looked at the document. It was several pages stapled. Someone had put markers on the signature lines. There were a lot of signature lines. "This would give Simone full authority over your finances," I said, reading. "For your protection," Derek said. "And the house?" There was a beat. "Well, the house would obviously stay yours," Simone said quickly. It's just being responsible, Mom. What if you fall? What if you have an episode of some kind?" An episode. I set the document down and picked up my coffee cup. I kept my face pleasant. I had spent 34 years being married to a man who never made a decision out of panic, and some of that had rubbed off on me. "Let me read through it carefully," I said. "I'll have Mr. Hensley take a look." Something moved across Derek's face, quick, gone before I could name it. "That's of course," he said. "Of course, take your time." They left around 3. I stood at the kitchen window and watched Derek's car back out of the driveway, and I thought, that document was not drafted this week. That document was not drafted this week. That document had been in preparation for a while. The signature lines were too neat. The language was too specific. I called Mr. Hensley Monday morning. He called me back within the hour, which was unusual. "Iris," he said. "My name is Iris. Iris Beaumont, named after my grandmother's garden. I need you to come in." I went in Tuesday. I sat across from Mr. Hensley in his office with the document in my hands, and he walked me through it section by section with the careful patience of a man delivering news he wishes were different. "This is not a standard power of attorney," he said. "This gives your daughter and her husband, jointly, not separately, authority over every financial account you hold, the ability to liquidate assets, and in Section 7, the ability to make decisions regarding your primary residence, including sale." I heard myself say, "I see. Iris, this is your home. This is everything Gerald worked for." "I know," I said. I drove home. I made tea. I sat in the chair by the front window, the one Gerald used to sit in to read, and I thought for a very long time. By Thursday, I had an appointment with an attorney. Her name was Beverly Marsh, and she was 64 and had been practicing estate law in our county for 30 years. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and she did not soften things. "They're hoping you'll sign this before you understand what it means," she said. "It's not criminal to ask. It would be criminal to misuse it. But given what you've described about your daughter's husband's financial situation, I'd be very cautious. Gerald had always said, when someone shows you who they are, pay attention. I had been paying attention, quietly, for 2 years. The way Derek's company had hit rough water and then rougher water. The way Simone had started making small comments about the house, how much it was worth now, how the market was good, had I thought about downsizing. The way, last Thanksgiving, Derek had just mentioned, casually, the way you'd mention the weather. That his brother-in-law had done very well selling his mother's house and moving her into a nice independent living facility. "Very nice," he said. "Very well run." I was not ready for independent living. I was not ready to give up my kitchen, my morning walks down Crescent Hill, the garden Gerald planted along the back fence that I had kept alive through 3 hard winters because I couldn't bear to let anything else of his go. Beverly and I worked for 3 weeks. We updated my will. We established a revocable living trust that placed my home and primary accounts inside it, with specific ironclad language about what could and could not be done without a judge's review. We named Mr. Hensley as the independent trustee. We documented everything, including the original document Derek had slid across my table. Then I waited. My birthday is April 14th. Simone called the week before and said they'd like to take me to dinner. "Somewhere nice," she said. I said that would be lovely. I said I'd been thinking about the document and wanted to talk things through in person. I could hear something in her voice shift. Relief, I think, or what she thought was relief. We went to a steakhouse out on Route 9, the kind of place with white tablecloths and a wine list, and enough ambient noise that nobody hears anybody's business. My son-in-law wore his best suit. Simone wore the earrings I'd given her for her 30th birthday, which I noticed and tried not to read too much into. We ordered. We made pleasant conversation, and then Derek reached into his jacket and produced a fresh copy of the document. "Updated," he said, "just a few small changes," and set it on the table beside my bread plate. He had a pen ready. "We just want to protect you, Iris," he said. He never called me Mom. "Always, Iris. You understand that." I looked at the document. I looked at my daughter. She was looking at the tablecloth. "Simone," I said quietly, "look at me." She looked up. Do you understand what this document does? All of it? Have you read every section? She opened her mouth, closed it. I helped her understand it, Derek said. I'm asking her, I said. The table was very quiet. Mom, Simone started, and her voice had a tremor in it that broke something small and painful in my chest. Things are hard right now. The business, Simone. Derek said her name like a door closing. She stopped. And that was the moment I understood that this was not my daughter asking me for help. This was my daughter being used as a delivery mechanism by a man who had done the math on my assets and decided that my age and my grief and my love for my child were vulnerabilities he could work with. I put the pen down on the table beside the document. Cap still on. I had the document reviewed, I said, by Beverly Marsh over on Cumberland. I also met with my financial advisor and updated my estate plan 3 weeks ago. Derek's expression didn't change exactly, but something behind it did. There's a trust now, I said. The house is in it. My accounts are structured differently. Nothing can be transferred or sold or encumbered without trustee approval and, in most cases, a court review. It's all filed and recorded. The silence at the table was a different kind of silence from the one before. I'm not angry, I said, and I meant it, or I was trying to. But I need you both to understand that this conversation is over. Not just tonight, this specific conversation. It's over. Simone's eyes filled. Mom, I didn't. I know, I said. And I didn't know entirely, and I suspected the truth was somewhere in the complicated middle where love and pressure and debt and a husband's voice in your ear make it hard to see clearly. I knew my daughter. I also knew she had made choices about who she listened to. Derek pushed back his chair. He stopped, started again. You're making this into something it isn't. No, I said, I'm not. He stood up. He said something under his breath that I didn't catch and didn't ask him to repeat. He walked out. Simone sat across from me for a long moment, not speaking, and then she picked up her purse and followed him. I sat alone at the table with the document between us. A server came and refilled my water glass without being asked, which I thought was kind. I ordered the salmon. I ate it slowly. I watched the other tables, a couple celebrating something, a family with teenagers all on separate phones, and I thought about Gerald the way I always think about Gerald in the moments I need steadying. He would have handled this differently, probably. More quietly. He was better at patience than I am. But he also used to say, there's a difference between keeping the peace and letting people take what's yours. Simone called me twice that night. I didn't answer. I texted her, I love you. Call me when you're ready to talk without him on the line. She didn't respond until the next morning. What followed was not easy, and I won't pretend it was. The months after that dinner were some of the loneliest I'd had since the first winter after Gerald died. Simone and I talked, haltingly, in phone calls and eventually in person at a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon when I knew Derek was in meetings. We didn't resolve everything. We may not resolve everything for a long time, but she told me something in that coffee shop that I have kept close to me since. She told me that Derek had been the one to find the template for the document online, that he had told her it was standard, that she hadn't read it the way I'd read it because she had trusted him to understand it, and she hadn't wanted to seem suspicious of her own husband. I held my coffee cup with both hands and listened. I should have talked to you first, she said. Before any of it. Yes, I said. You should have. I'm sorry, Mom. There is no clean ending to a story like this, and I distrust the kind of stories that pretend otherwise. My daughter and I are finding our way back to each other. It is slow. It involves some awkward phone calls and at least one afternoon where we both cried in my kitchen over cups of tea. Derek and I have a civil distance between us that I suspect may be permanent, and I have made my peace with that. The house still stands on Crescent Hill. The garden Gerald planted comes up every spring without being asked. Determined, the way living things are when they're rooted somewhere good. I walk my 2 miles every morning. I have coffee with my neighbor Faye on Fridays. I see Beverly Marsh once a year to review the trust, and I see Mr. Montes Hensley twice, just like I'd promised Gerald I would. I turned 62 in April. I had cake with Faye and her husband and a friend from my book club, a woman named Alice who makes the best lemon pound cake I have ever had in my life. We sat on my back porch until the sun went down, and at some point Alice said, "To 62," and raised her glass, and I raised mine back and thought, yes, to 62, to the house I'm keeping, to the accounts nobody else's name is on, to the garden that came back again, the way it always does, regardless of the winter. To knowing the difference between someone who loves you and someone who has decided what you're worth. That's a lesson that took me 62 years to learn all the way through. I'm not sorry it cost what it cost. I'm only sorry it had to, but I know it now, and I'm not letting go of it. I've had a long time now to sit with everything that happened. And what I keep coming back to is this. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to become the kind of person who protects themselves. It's a slow education. You learn it in pieces, usually at some cost, and by the time you've learned it all the way through, you've already paid more than you would have liked. What Derek saw when he looked at me was a widow in her 60s with a paid-off house and accounts she didn't talk about much. He saw grief and he saw love, my love for Simone specifically, and he calculated that those two things together made me manageable. That's not a cruel reading of him. That's just accurate. He was a man who understood leverage. He had built a career on it. He looked at me and saw an opportunity, and he was wrong, but not because I was stronger than he assumed. He was wrong because I had spent 4 years watching a man I loved handle every hard thing with patience and precision, and some of that had found its way into me without my even trying. Gerald used to say that the most important financial decision you ever make isn't about money at all. It's about who you trust. And the second most important decision is knowing what to do when you realize you trusted the wrong person. I trusted Simone. I still do, in the complicated way you trust someone who loves you but has also allowed herself to be pointed in the wrong direction by someone who doesn't. She wasn't innocent, but she wasn't the architect either. The truth of it sits somewhere uncomfortable in the middle, and I've had to make room for that. What I couldn't make room for was the idea that love, even real love, even the kind that stretches back 34 years to a baby I held in a hospital in October, should cost me the life Gerald and I built together. That's not cynical, that's just clarity. The two things can exist at once. I love my daughter and I will not hand over my home. I love my daughter and I called an attorney. I love my daughter, and I sat alone at that restaurant table after they walked out and ordered the salmon and ate every bite, because I had earned that meal, and I was not going to leave it untouched on the table because someone else had made a scene. The choices we make when no one is looking, that's where character actually lives. Derek made his choices in back rooms and with borrowed legal templates. I made mine in Mr. Hensley's office on a Tuesday morning. Beverly Marsh made mine cleaner and stronger and recorded. And when the evening at that steakhouse finally came, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't threaten. I just told the truth plainly. And the truth was enough, because I had spent 3 weeks making sure it would be. That's the part I want to remember, not the fear I felt in the weeks before, not the loneliness of those months after. I want to remember that when it mattered, I was patient and I was prepared, and that those two things together are more powerful than anything someone can slide across a table at you. Simone and I are still finding our way. It's not a straight line, but she's finding it too, and that matters more to me than being right about any of it. The house is still mine. The garden came up again this spring, and I am still, at 62, very much here.